Today, I want to invite you to dive with me into a deep, serious, and extremely important topic: the most serious sins mentioned in the Bible. The Bible is not just an ancient book. It is a living source of moral and spiritual teachings, a guide that shows us the right path, corrects our attitudes, and helps us understand what pleases and what grieves the heart of God. When we talk about the most serious sins, we are not here to condemn anyone, but to reflect. Identifying these mistakes helps us value virtue, pursue a more righteous life, and strengthen our walk with God. Let's begin by talking about one of the most dangerous sins: pride. Pride is that feeling of extreme arrogance, when a person begins to trust too much in themselves and starts to see themselves as superior to others. It is when pride replaces humility. Pride distances us from dependence on God, because a proud person believes they don't need anyone, not even the Lord. The Bible clearly warns us about this in Proverbs 16 verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. This means that pride is the beginning of destruction. Before someone falls, before facing a major defeat, there was often pride in their heart. That is why humility is spiritual protection. In fifth place, we have greed. Greed is an excessive love for money and material possessions. There is nothing wrong with working, achieving, and prospering. The problem begins when money becomes more important than God, more important than people, and more important than spiritual values. A greedy person is never satisfied. They always want more. It is never enough. And in this relentless pursuit of material things, they lose contentment, lose generosity, and often lose peace. Jesus teaches something very powerful about this in Luke 12 verse 15. Watch out! Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. In other words, our life is not defined by what we have, but by who we are before God. The fourth sin we will reflect on is envy. Envy arises when we look at what others have, whether success, possessions, talents, or relationships, and instead of rejoicing with them, we feel sadness or bitterness. It is a silent but extremely destructive feeling. Envy prevents us from celebrating the victories of others. It corrodes us from the inside. Instead of gratitude, comparison is born. Instead of joy, resentment grows. Proverbs 14 verse 30 warns us. A peaceful heart gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Notice how strong that expression is, rots the bones. Envy not only destroys spiritually, it also affects our emotional and even physical well-being. In third place, let's talk about wrath. Wrath is that explosion of anger, the lack of emotional control, acting on impulse. All of us feel anger at some point. The problem is when we allow it to control us. When we are dominated by anger, we say hurtful words, make impulsive decisions, damage relationships, and lose our peace. Wrath creates conflict and distances us from the love and compassion that God expects from us. In Ephesians 4 verse 26, we find important advice. In your anger do not sin. In other words, the feeling may arise, but we must not allow it to lead us into sin. We need to learn how to control our emotions and act with wisdom. Now let's talk about something that is often ignored, but just as serious: laziness. Laziness is not simply resting. Rest is necessary. The problem is constant negligence, lack of effort, and lack of commitment to our responsibilities. Laziness prevents us from developing our talents, growing, fulfilling our duties, and reaching what God has for us. It paralyzes us. In Proverbs 6 verses 6 to 8, the Bible teaches us something very interesting. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. The ant is an example of diligence, organization, and effort. The message is clear. We must be responsible and dedicated. And finally, let's talk about lust. Lust is uncontrolled sexual desire. When a person seeks pleasure selfishly and outside the principles established by God. Sexuality is a divine gift, created by God to be lived within commitment, respect, and the sanctity of marriage. But when this gift is used irresponsibly, it becomes sin. Lust turns people into objects and places pleasure above spiritual values. Jesus speaks about this in Matthew 5 verse 28. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Here, Jesus shows that sin does not begin only in action, it begins in the heart. Everything starts in our thoughts. These are some of the most serious sins mentioned in the Bible. And the purpose of talking about them is not to accuse, but to bring awareness. All of us fail at some point. All of us need God's grace. What matters most is reflecting on our attitudes, recognizing our mistakes, and seeking reconciliation with the Lord. God is just, but He is also merciful. He calls us to virtue, holiness, and a transformed life. If this message spoke to you, share it with others who also need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment telling us which of these topics touched your heart the most. May God bless your life, and see you in the next video.